Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space, here live with the man of the hour, Esteban Toro, for part four of six of our six-part series here, Basic Photography. Esteban, we're off to a wonderful start here, as you can see. I should just kick it over to you already, right?
Oh, thank you, Derek. I'm happy to be here. No worries. It happens.
We're happy to have you back, man. It feels like just yesterday you were here.
Oh, yeah, it feels like that. Was it yesterday?
I know normally it's like we space these out by a week. We didn't give anybody every time. We're like, let's stack it back to back. But as you guys know, as I said, we are here for part 4 of 6, sponsored by Sony for Intro to Photography. So whether you guys know what you're doing or not, you're in the right place, because you might pick up something new, even if you're a professional or an advanced hobbyist. Esteban's going to show you how he does things. Today, we're discussing white balance, RAW versus JPEG, histogram. So I can guarantee you guys are going to pick up something. And as always, we do welcome your questions. So don't wait until the end. Get them in. If you have a question when Esteban's talking about something, get it in and we'll see if we can mix it in. So do want to welcome you guys once again. Before I kick it over to Esteban, and a huge thank you to Esteban for sharing his time and expertise, and also Sony for sponsoring this series. Esteban, I'm going to kick it over to you. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you very much, Derek. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Welcome in again. We have our 4th session today. We have been discussing how to use the camera, how to understand what are all these strange settings that sometimes we heard from photographers. What does it mean to use the shutter speed? What is the depth of field, the aperture, the ISO, the noise? We have discussed many things. I have received many questions on my Instagram. I'm really thankful with all these questions that have come in. I really appreciate them, and you can also feel free to reach out after if you have the question after the class, but also feel free to throw it to Derek and we will solve it during our class. We have gone through many things and we will need multiple sessions to explore everything that is in the camera. So I just decided that in these sessions, I'm gonna try to summarize it and give you the best possible so you can start with your cameras. There are many topics that are more advanced that we will need to cover after, but I'm just trying to get the basic covered. So today I want to start with taking back a question that came from the session number 3, where we were exploring shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And we were discussing how these 3 settings modify as well the exposure. So it changes the light of the picture. Some of you will think like, okay, I understand that I can freeze the action or I can increase the ISO to have more light, but when do I know exactly if my picture is gonna look as I want it to look? And let me start by my own experience and the past. I'm gonna give you a history class of photography. And no, maybe I'm joking. This is a DSLR camera. Basically, I had this camera and I remember that I was showing you that the light comes here to this dark room and we have a system of mirrors that are just here. And these mirrors help us to see through the viewfinder. So when we used to have these DSLR cameras that didn't have the mirrorless system that we are using now, mainly, we used to look here, and what we had here was a glass. We had a piece of glass that wouldn't show us any information about what was happening in the final picture. So when we were doing that, we had to guess how the light was gonna work, or we had another tool that was very, very useful. That was the meter, an exposure meter that will help us to understand when the exposure was going to look correctly. So let me share with you how this exposure looks like. I'm going to share my screen. I hope I've been having some trouble with sharing a screen, so please apologize if it crashes. I will be here all the time. So this what is highlighted in red is the meter that we used to have when we were looking through the viewfinder of the camera. So I will look to the camera and I will see a little bit of, I will see the frame, I will see the whole composition through my glass, and I will see a little thing that is the thing that I highlight in red. And basically that thing will show me how the exposure and the light was going to look like once I click and take the final picture. So I would just click, like I would just do click, and then I will be able to see the picture on my screen. But it was a long process before I click, and I had to check my picture, and then I had to look at how it was like looking, if the light was good or not. Nowadays, and especially with the mirrorless system cameras that Sony is using from a very long time ago, we have a new system that allows us to have a screen, a display with a computer that automatically show to us how the image is going to look like. So the way that I can show you this is very similar to how our cell phones works, that basically I just point with my cell phone and immediately I can see how the picture is going to look like after. It's the same system, is the same principle, but it changed the whole game. And when I joke about that, this is like I'm going to teach you history of photography, I was joking because we used to use this technology until very recently, and there are still some photographers who use this kind of cameras for certain specific jobs, or because they don't want to switch to mirrorless for some reasons. But basically, I feel that it's already an old technology. And when I started in Sony, using Sony back in 2017, I discovered that it was one of my favorite features that I was going to have in my camera, because then I didn't have to guess anymore and use this old system that I'm showing you here, that it's the exposimeter, this boring system. I didn't have to count on that anymore. I would just have to look through the viewfinder as I'm looking with my cell phone, and then I will understand how the light is going to look like. I know that maybe some of you, and I promise I was going to make it fair, will have these DSLR cameras. So let me just go super simple through that, and then I will just jump into the mirrorless system. That it's how we do it now, and I will give you some good insights and tools of how to control the light there. If you look carefully what I'm showing you on the screen, you have a 0 in the middle, you have a plus, and you have a minus. What it was showing you, and there was kind of a dot in the middle that will move when you move the shutter speed, the aperture, or the ISO. So this dot will move to the right or to the left, to the plus or to the minus, depending on how the light was looking like. So it didn't care if the picture was going to be the effect was going to be a motion or freezing, or there was going to be a shallow depth of field or a deep depth of field. It was basically just like how the light is going to look like. Ideally, at the time, we had to take this dot to the middle, to the 0, and it was going to mean that all lights and shadows were kind of well captured, and we were going to be able to post-process them. And I'm already speaking about post-processing. But what it's really important to me to mention here is that exposure, that mirror tend to fail a lot depending on what you are doing. To me, I always knew that I had to underexpose my picture to be able to recover the details, because going exactly to 0 was gonna overexpose certain areas of my photograph that I was not gonna be able to recover after. I know you might get lost with this. Don't worry, I will guide you through that. I just want to show you how it looks like and the tools that I like to use after. So I'm gonna jump again into the mirrorless cameras, like the Sony ones that we use. And here you will have that when you're taking the photograph and you turn on the screen, immediately you see the same, what you see here on the screen or what you see on the viewfinder. It's exactly the same what you're looking at. There's one tool that is called the histogram that is very useful. I have come to realize that many photographers have no idea how to use it. Maybe like hobbyist photographers. So I think it's one of the tools that we definitely need to know how to interpret and use, because it's like we studied this tool when we were learning photography, but we have no idea how to use it in real life. So I think that's where it comes very handy. I have my histogram here, very, very small. I know you cannot see it, but it's here. So I'm able to see it also when I'm looking through the viewfinder. How to read the histogram? Basically, we have two sides. One side is gonna show the pixel quantity. It's gonna show us how many pixels from my camera are in that area. And the other one is gonna show us the different tones in the image, the dynamic range. So we can split this histogram in three parts. The part that goes to the left are the shadows. The part that goes to the middle are the midtones. And the part that goes to the right are the highlights. So I give you here some idea of some histograms that underexposed, correctly exposed, and overexposed. This is kind of ideal situations, but it will depend on every situation and every scene that we are photographing. And that's where I want to go. And that's the reason I want to jump into Lightroom. That is the software that I use to develop and post-process my photographs. But before I jump into that, I want to mention the difference and why I will take my pictures to Lightroom. And then it's where we go to RAW files versus JPEG. If you are not familiar with what I'm speaking about formats that the pictures are taking. So basically what is happening is that the light is entering the camera, the picture is getting created here in the lens, and then it's recorded by the sensor. And then there is a small computer inside this camera that is processing all this information. This is basically metadata that is being processed, and then it's going to be saved in our cards that we all know. And then we take back into our computers, we download this picture, we edit it, and we share it, let's say, on Instagram. So let's go to the process where the picture is taken. The picture is taken, goes to the computer, and then the computer basically is asking one question to you as a user. Hey, dear photographer, do you want the picture to be edited by me? And that I will decide how the contrast, the white balance, the colors, the saturation is going to look like? Or do you want me to give you all the information to you and you want to process it? I know you will be wondering like, oh, but my camera has never asked me that question. It has, it's just that it's one setting that you adjust. That is basically when you decide that the format that you want to be capturing is JPEG or RAW. When you're capturing a JPEG, that is the most common format that we capture, that we use, for example, in our cell phones. Every time that I take a picture, I just take a picture right now, I send it to Derek, and Derek receives it. He gets a JPEG image, and that's how it works. So that's very easy. A JPEG file is a file that is processed, that is light, and it's hard to manipulate, kind of, in the sense of that will not allow me to post-process as much as a RAW file will allow me to. Instead, a RAW file is a heavy file, is unprocessed, and especially it's a file that not everyone will be able to upload or to send or to open once you get it. So it happens that you send a RAW file to a client, and they will tell you like, oh, you know, I can't open the file. Like I try to open it in my computer or in my cell phone, and it says that the file is broken, that something's missing. So can you send it over again? The situation is that when you're sending a RAW file, you're sending all the information that was captured by the cameras. And I think one of the reasons why we want to pay a very expensive and good camera is to have a really strong and big RAW file. That's the main reason, at least to me as a photographer, that I decided to use a camera like this one instead of my cell phone to capture majority of my work. There are cell phones nowadays that are able to capture RAW files, but I just feel it's not the same quality. So the question will come like, okay, so I have to use RAW file always? That depends. If you feel that you want to edit your picture and take more information out of the image and create something more like a piece of art, you want to post-process, you want to recover areas, and you're interested in taking your pictures kind of an artwork, then yes, I will suggest you to go for a RAW file. if you're more interested in having the picture as it's taken, or you're more into photojournalism and you don't want to post-process your image, maybe you're just lazy, you don't like computers, you feel that post-processing is a long part, or you don't have the eye for that, then probably you want to stick with JPEG. Also, if you don't want to send the raw, let's say the raw file to your client because you're not, I don't know, like that's part of the deal, you just want to send the JPEG and you want to keep the raw files, you can also do that in your camera and you can set it up. So that's how it's our raw files and our JPEGs are gonna work. What I'm gonna show you, that I'm gonna jump into Lightroom, they are all raw files that I have taken with my cameras, and I want to show you how much I can recover from them. So let me stop sharing my screen here, and I will just jump to Lightroom over there. I don't know if we have some questions direct till now, or while I jump into this.
Yes, we do. We do. I'm going to jump on one here from Mark joining us on Zoom. He says, Esteban, your example histograms in your early slide aren't anywhere near as spiky as the ones that his camera generates. He says his look more like an EKG for somebody with a heart condition. So spikes all over the place. He says his images tend to be difficult to post-process for detail in both shadow and highlight regions, even if they don't tend to be heavily weighted to one end or the other.
Okay.
Any thoughts on this?
Okay, great question. I'm going to answer it as soon as I go to Lightroom, because I want to show you different kind of histograms that you can get depending on what you're capturing. So that's why the graphic that I show you is tricky. Don't rely completely on it, because if you start comparing your pictures with that histogram, you will think like, oh, all my pictures are bad. And maybe, probably, very likely they are not. It's just that is a different scene. So let's jump into that. I will solve that question in a second. Do we have any other question?
Perfect. Reed's had a question from yesterday. You were talking about the 16 to 35 lens. So Reed's just purchased a Canon EOS T8i, which is a crop sensor DSLR. And he's asking about an equivalent lens to compare to the 16 to 35. So I think it probably would be in the best interest of time. What I can do is, while you continue, I can pull up some comparable lenses for that for Reed's, and I'll drop them in the chat here for you. So if anybody else would like to know any questions, gear specific, even if it's something not Sony related, I know Esteban shoots Sony, but if any brand out there,
it's forbidden, Derek.
So don't hesitate. Get your questions in on gear. This is really what we're here for. So even if it's something that doesn't have to do with specific Sony, content that we're talking about today, or if it's not Sony centric, get it in. You know, if we can help you out and help get it answered, even if it's something where I'm typing answers while Esteban's teaching, make sure you guys get those in. So that's all we have for now, Esteban. So we can continue, and we'll go from there.
Lovely. I will just jump into Lightroom. So this is my Lightroom desk. I'm just working here. You can see some of my pictures that I have taken. These are the raw files. These are just as they came out of my camera. So I just took the picture like that. Let me show you one of my most iconic pictures that I took, and let me also share with you the story. I don't know if I already told you this story. I have shared this story many times, so forgive me if I already have already, but just let me share it with you. I was shooting with a Nikon camera. That's what I used before my Sony. And I had this day that it was the last day that I was going to be able to capture the Taj Mahal. I wanted to capture the reflection on the water. And there was a huge storm coming in. So the boat guy, it was really a very cheap boat, decided that we were not going to be able to go in the boat. So he said, don't bother me. I came to bother him many times because I noticed that the weather could change. And then while I was waiting for the boat to just go into the water, this girl came with this beautiful dress running towards me, asking me if I could let her in. When I saw her with this beautiful sari, I was like, yeah, of course you can come. I will take all pictures of you. So I was just going in the boat. I had the beautiful reflection. I was shooting with the camera, with the DSLR, and I was especially scared about one thing. I was very scared that the sun was going to be slightly overexposed and I was not going to have information there. And I just told you, since I didn't have the mirrorless system camera, I had a mirror here. I had to worry all the time to look through the exposed meter, making sure that I was underexposing, that it was not going to be like just exploding there in that area, but that I was not gonna that I was just gonna not lose details, but I was also not gonna underexpose too much because I will also lose details on in the shadows. So the truth is that while I was taking this picture, I was very, very scared. That's the truth, because of the exposure. And by the time I had been taking pictures for 10 years or so, so I knew what I was doing, but still I was scared because this was one of these situations where I was like, this is the picture. I had the feeling like this is an incredible situation, an incredible location. The weather is amazing. I found this incredible model out of nowhere. So I need to concentrate to make it worth it. And I'm just gonna mute my camera so you will be able to see the histogram here on the top right side of the picture. And this is how the histogram looks like. So if you look carefully, what I'm showing you is that there is plenty of information on the left side of the picture. There is a little bit of information in the midtones, and there is information, but not so much on the highlights. Now, if I compare that to what I'm looking in the camera and in the final picture, that makes sense. Think about it. It's the sunset, it's backlighting. So everything, the Taj Mahal, the model, they have no light absolutely at all. And I only have one point that it's getting a lot of overexposure or a lot of highlights, that is the sun. So if I look at the whole area of the picture, the highlights are not even like 20% of the whole picture. The shadows and the midtones are basically the rest of the image. So if I look at the histogram, it makes sense that the histogram is looking way more towards the left side than towards the right. And in the case of this photograph, it's exactly what I'm looking for. And the reason for that is because I'm gonna recover that information in post-processing. So what do I mean? If you don't know post-processing, don't worry. We will at some point make and discuss about post-processing and starting from zero. Just follow the picture, and that's what I'm very interested. This is how the image looks like, and I'm just gonna start recovering information. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna take the shadows and recover them. I'm gonna take the blacks and recover them. And look at just with this, look at all the information that I already pulled, that I already took from the picture and recover. It's amazing. Now I will just, now I want to recover this information here, the sun. Yes, I have a little bit, you can see the circle of the sun, but I want to have more information there. So I'm just gonna recover with the highlights, and boom, there you have it. A very beautiful, perfect sun, just a spot. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Then I can just, this is not a post-processing class, but I just want to show you what I'm able to recover just with a few clicks here in Lightroom. That will allow me to, just to get that information that I'm looking for. Something like this, few clicks, and let me show you the before and after of how my image is changing. I'm not doing some mystery process. I'm not doing some kind of tricky magic here. I'm just recovering information that did exist in the photograph when I took the image. This is not like, oh, but you're photoshopping it. No, I'm not adding information. I'm not erasing information that wasn't originally in the picture. I'm just recovering, pulling up everything that is taken by the camera, by the raw file. This is something that I will not be able to do if I had a JPEG file. If I just capture in JPEG, And I have the image on the left. Basically, when I will try to bring all these shadows back to life, I will have a lot of noise. And the reason for that is because it's compressed file. Once the camera is taking the picture, it's just gonna ask you, do you want to post-process it? No, just post-process it yourself and just give me the small file. All right, there you have the JPEG. This is your JPEG, that's all you have. And there are multiple opinions about it, if you should post-process your pictures or not. But I have always claimed that I post-process my pictures. I don't edit them. I don't add things or delete things that weren't there. I just change little details to make them look more beautiful, because I'm interested in creating art with my photographs. So that is what you have when you take a raw file. And that's the reason why I decided that I'm always gonna shoot raw. Many students come with this question, Esteban, but raw files are quite heavy. They're hard to manage. I don't have the computer for it. Maybe I can take some pictures in RAW, some pictures in JPEG, but the situation is that you never know when you're gonna take the picture that might change your career or that you really, really love. So just to make it, so how you take a picture and how you make sure that you're taking the right image once you're shooting with your camera, especially with your mirrorless, basically all you have to take care of is that if you look, let me go back to the original histogram that I had here. If you look at the histogram, it's going all the way to the left. It's almost telling you there are plenty of shadows. The blacks are really we have a huge amount of pixels in the shadows. And if I look at the picture and I know how to read the light and I understand this is exactly what I need, then I'm being aware exactly of what I'm capturing with my camera. The great thing about mirrorless cameras is that you can see the histogram here on the screen and here on the viewfinder. So if you look at the histogram while you're taking the picture, you can take easily these decisions, and that will make you to have better choices when you're post-processing. Another thing that I didn't like much about the DSLR cameras is that you had the meter, the exposure meter that I show you, the first two graphics that were old and ugly and small, those ones. When you had the exposure, if you used to expose to 0, photography teachers will teach you this is the right exposure. But reality is that when you were gonna recover that information in post-processing, perhaps some information will be gone. So that's why one of the big game changers, at least for me, with mirrorless cameras, was that you were able to have the histogram while you're taking the photograph. That was completely mind-blowing to me. In the Sony cameras, we have another thing that is very, very cool, very useful, that it's the Zebra. Zebra is an option that you can activate, and I'm not sure if you're gonna be able to see it here because my screen is a little bit small, but basically, if you, let me try to, here you should be able to see that it's getting kind of a Zebra thing on the camera. That Zebra is telling you where the picture is gonna be overexposed. So basically it's telling you, hey, photographer, be careful, that part is getting overexposed. Which is funny because it's the camera speaking to you, talking about post-processing already. It's telling you, hey, if you take the picture like this, you will not be able to recover those details. If you don't know what is these details, and if you don't know post-processing, yeah, for sure, you will not understand and you will just take the picture. If you know what this means, then you will think oh, hold on, I need to have these details, so I have to change my exposure, maybe I have to reduce my shutter speed or close my aperture or reduce my ISO to recover that information. That's how you expose your pictures in a mirrorless camera. Basically, it's very like how you will use a cell phone. So you play with the three settings: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. You adjust them until you can basically see with your eye the image and everything on the on the screen. But you also are mindful about the histogram. And of course, you have to consider that depending on the shutter speed that you're using, you will freeze the action or you will create motion. Depending on the aperture, you will have a shallow depth of field or deep depth of field. And depending on the ISO, you will have clearer images or more noise. That's all the game of photography. That is very simple, but very complicated at the same time. Do we have questions up to now?
Sorry, it was taking me a second there. I was answering some questions in the chat. We do. I actually, there's a couple of questions, and one that is super relevant to what we're talking about as far as the histogram, and it's such a great question. I heard another photographer say that the histogram on the camera represents the JPEG image on the camera screen and not a RAW file. Is it qualitatively similar, but not to believe it? Let's see. It is qualitatively similar, but not to believe it exactly at the high exposure side. Can you comment? Great topic right here.
Yeah. Well, the truth is that I have done this exercise myself, especially when I started with the Sony cameras, because that was. And let me tell you the story how I became a Sony ambassador. I was in India. I had my old Nikon camera. I was traveling for some months already, and Sony called me. They said, like, Esteban, we want you to represent Sony. We like your pictures. We will give you gear. We will do this. We will do this other thing. And the truth is that back in 2017, I was just looking at my camera and I heard rumors about Sony, that they were not so strong for traveling, that they will not resist water, that battery wasn't long enough, things that probably you have heard if you are in this industry for a while. And so I was concerned because I was happy with my camera until that time. I was just looking at my old camera and I said, like, I think a new camera will be really good to have. So I remember that I told them, like, okay, I'm gonna take the equipment, I'm gonna like try it out. If I don't like it, I will just return it to you, because I can't be traveling with gear that I cannot rely on. So I decided to study a little bit this. And when I received my camera, one of the first things that I was very concerned was that the viewfinder was a screen. I was scared that I was going to get dizzy, or that it was not going to be as precise as the optical viewfinder with all the mirrors. So I was very hesitant. And when I saw these options, it was just mind blowing. I was like, this is the best thing ever. From the very beginning, I just decided, like, I'm not gonna use my DSLR camera anymore. And then I start checking the histogram, what was being captured here, what was showing me here, and what was showing me after in Lightroom in the histogram. And I was getting very similar results. So whether it's a JPEG like interpretation of the raw file, that question, it's really technical, and I'm sorry, I don't know it. But I can really tell you from my own experience that is very, very accurate of what I'm getting after in post-processing. That to me is the most important thing. I just come here to my studio, I stay in front of my huge screen where I see the whole picture, and I need the final picture to look beautiful. I don't care what's happening in the camera. I care what's going to happen here, because this is the final result. So I really trust this connection between the camera and the computer, if that helps to solve your question.
Yes, and I will throw in my 2 cents on that for those concerned. It is in fact true that what you're seeing on your camera in the histogram reflects the JPEG file. Now, if you are shooting without a color profile and without making any adjustments to your image in camera, you won't have to worry, because it's going to reflect the same file. Essentially, the JPEG is going to be pretty much the same as the raw file.
Yeah.
Now, when you get into selecting different color profiles, so for example, if you're shooting with a JPEG profile that is very contrasty and you're changing your color settings, anything that's changing the in-camera settings of the JPEG file, what's going to be reflected on that histogram is not the raw data, but the JPEG file. So if you have, let's say you messed with your highlights, if you have your highlights very, very, very contrasty and blown out, it's going to show you that your highlights are clipping on the histogram, but that might not necessarily be true for the raw file. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. If you guys aren't messing with your color profiles in camera or your contrast and image settings in camera, you won't necessarily have to worry about this. But if you are somebody who does customize your camera to get a look of your JPEGs, like in basically in-camera editing, this is something that you may want to pay attention to. And if anybody has any follow-ups on that, definitely feel free to drop a question in the Q&A or in the comment section.
Great. Thanks for that. Thanks for that insight, Derek. Very useful. I'm glad you're here to solve those questions.
I get the boring stuff.
Look, this is very interesting because, and this is like, you will be wondering like, okay, but why it's so important to recover the highlights? What is about it? So let me again stop my video over here. Look at this histogram. This is like one peak on each side of the histogram, very different. So basically, if I read it, it's like, Esteban, you have a lot of information on the shadows. You don't have so much information on the midtones, and you have, again, a lot of information on the highlights. So much information on the highlights that even the histogram is not showing me all the information that is there. And once it got all the way to the right, it's overexposed and I cannot recover that information. So let me show you how trying to recover those highlights are gonna look like. So first thing that I will do here in my Lightroom basic adjustments is just reduce the highlights, and I'm able to recover some information, but look what's happening here behind the mountain. There is like this white gloom over there that I cannot recover. Even if I try to go all the way to the exposure, it's already so overexposed that there is no information in the file, so I'm not able to recover it. There are some pictures that this kind of situation will be useful, but specifically for others, like the one that I show you, the girl with the sari, can you imagine how pity it will be to have not to have the sun, this beautiful spot in the background, but just like a overexposed sky without information of this beautiful sunset? That will be a shame, at least how I like to take my pictures. So I cannot recover that, but still, it doesn't mean that if the picture is overexposed, I cannot do stuff that to recover that information. Funny thing is that I promise it wasn't going to be a post-processing class, but I just love to post-process files. So I can still, I do still like this picture, and I can kind of take advantage of that overexposed area to make it intentional. But the truth, and this is also very important to be honest with you guys, it's that I wish this picture wasn't overexposed in that area and that I will have some information. Why it happened like this? Because they were praying on the temple in the early morning. I was inside, so I had very different settings, and they just start coming out, and I had to rush all the way out, and I was just following them with my camera, taking some pictures. And while I get out, of course, the light had changed a lot, and I tried to adjust very, very fast my settings, but everything happened in a matter of seconds. So I did the best that I could at the time. So this is very usual. I'm telling you that these situations of light are very ideal in certain situations. But also the histogram will change depending on what you're exposing. So I have shown you until now sunsets and sunrises, but what happens when you capture snow? Look at this histogram. It's like there is basically no, there is information in the shadows, a lot of information in the midtones, and some information in the highlights. Is there anything that is completely overexposed? I don't believe so. Let me try to recover just the highlights, so I can recover this motion from a snow. I think it was a car, or it was a something that happened in front of the of my framing, but I have basically information everywhere, so I'm able to take and recover all the picture and do basically what I like there. And look at a very contrast scene when it's telling me, hey, Esteban, all the information is in the shadows. You have a little bit of information in the midtones and very little of information in the highlights. Where are the highlights? Probably here on here's forehead, probably here on the hands. And is it underexposed, the picture? I don't believe so. The picture is not because it's my picture, but I think that it's perfectly exposed because it's exactly as I imagined that it was going to look like. So then I can just add a little bit of contrast, and to me it's basically, well, I will do a couple more of things here on post-processing and the picture will be done. So if you look carefully, I'm showing you different histograms depending on what you're capturing. Look at a picture that is taken not during sunset, it's not very contrast, it's like a cloudy day, overcast day in the mountains of Vietnam. You will have some information in the shadows, plenty of information in the midtones, some information in the highlights. Is it correctly or bad exposed? I think it's correctly exposed because I have plenty of information everywhere in the picture. So many people ask, like, Esteban, is there any perfect histogram? Is there something that I should follow? And that's when I tell you that this graphic that I show you is tricky and perhaps it's a little bit misleading. And then you ask, but why you show it? It's just a reference, please. But basically what I'm trying to show you is that it will always depend on what you're capturing. So it's very important for you as photographers that you understand how to read the histogram very fast. So when you're looking in your camera and you're looking at the picture and the scene that you're photographing, you think like, of course, the histogram is going like with peaks on the shadows, peaks on the highlights, because there is so much information here. It's such a contrast image that the way that it's reading the light is very different than what is happening, for example, in a picture like this, where it's very, let's say, kind of dull, without contrast, because there is not, like contrast with the light. So different situations of light will create different conditions of pictures. Again, look, another sunset, where basically what I'm taking care of here is just to take care of the sun, and of course the composition and everything, but I'm taking care that the sun will be perfect, so I will be able to recover the sun. And then if I don't want it for this picture, I like it very like with that contrast and mystery feeling, but if I want to recover information there, the information is here and I can just recover it. The same situation will happen with a picture like this one, where you will see that everything is basically in shadow. I'm trying to capture the sun, but this is something also important to mention. There are angles of the sun where you are not able to capture the whole sun. So even if you try and you reduce to the max or to the minimum, depending how you see it, the shutter speed, if you close your aperture and if you reduce your ISO, you will still have so much light that is virtually impossible to recover it. So I try as much as I can to have a spot as a sun, and then I just recover that information after in the post-processing. So this is the reason why, to me, it's very important to capture in RAW and not in JPEG, because I know that all the pictures that when I'm traveling, I'm capturing, I'm gonna go through Lightroom and post-process them and just get new results out of it. So this leads me to the point that it's important to understand what you want to get from your file. if you feel that you don't like to post-process, and nowadays you don't have to go on your computer. If you're more into mobile photography, you can just do it in your cell phone. Now, Lightroom, you can download it and edit all your raw files from here. You can transfer it directly from the camera to the cell phone, post-process it there, and then just upload it, let's say, to your social media. But if you don't like post-processing, because you consider that it's not photography anymore, that is not photojournalism, or because you think that it's too much for you, then JPEG will be more than fine. It's also not the end of the world if you, by mistake, capture a JPEG file instead of a RAW file. Every day, camera producers are creating better and better JPEG files that allow you to recover information. But let's say that the raw file will allow you to recover way more than a JPEG will allow you to. So I want to leave a few minutes just to answer some questions about exposure, if this clarifies how to take the pictures and how to mix shutter speed, aperture, and ISO to create your images.
Oh, trust me, we have questions.
And by I already told you that this time of the day is tricky because I'm facing sunset, and then it's getting dark. So actually, it's a good example. Look, now I'm at 1/50th of a second, f2.8, and ISO 250. So what I'm gonna do is just increase the ISO, so you will be able to see me, and we can chat.
There you go. And that's a perfect example for how the light changes the mood. And
I'm super overexposed, so I have just my controller to change my exposure. I'm just gonna compensate here, and let me just change it. Whoop, something like this. Whoa, too much. I'm ready for your questions, Derek.
All right, perfect. Let's see. Where do we begin? All right, let's start here. We've had a couple questions on Micro Four Thirds cameras. So Brian is asking, what's your opinion on Micro Four Thirds? Have you used them? Anything to say on them?
No, I have to be honest, I have never used them. So yeah, anything that I will tell you, what I think about this, and we will discuss about sensors in the next session. And yeah, the size of sensors, I think it will be a good opportunity, but I know many of you will be like, what, sensor size? What, there are sizes? Yes, there are sizes. I just think that I personally like to print my pictures very big. So to me, it's important the resolution. If I could, I will shoot in medium format, and I mean, resolution to me matters. If you're gonna do social media stuff, it doesn't matter. You can, it doesn't make any difference.
Mm-hmm. And for those of you interested in that, we've had a couple questions actually on Micro Four Thirds. So taking mental notes up here. We'll make sure we get some information on the channel about Micro Four Thirds for those of you who had interest in that. Basically, just in a nutshell, it's a smaller, compact system generally, where you're getting a little bit more depth of field with that system. Mm-hmm. So we do see that used in instances like wildlife photography, where people want a little bit more depth and detail, and also a number of street photographers. The legend in New York, Matt Weber, is shoots religiously on his digital setup is a Micro Four Thirds camera. So that's just a little random tidbit of information there, but we'll make sure we get some information on the channel in the coming months for those of you who are asking about the Micro Four Thirds setups. Kat has a question asking, why do you set the camera down on the lens instead of the body? She's curious.
The camera down on the lens instead of the body. Oh, like this. Great. Well, you know,
he's like, I never even realized I do it.
Yeah, and it's great. It's great that you noticed it. It's cool that you're looking at these details. Lovely. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I think the reason it's because I feel the lens is a little bit wider. So if I just set up the camera like this, I don't know, I feel it's more fragile, that maybe I will just do something, you know, I love to speak with my hands. So maybe I will just speaking like that. And can you imagine if the camera will fall down? and that will go recorded and live on PNH, and a lot of people will see it. Shame on me. No, I don't want to have that to happen. So I feel that here it's a little bit more stable. Look, even if I hit it, it will be more stable. It's yeah, just how I do it. I just try to find what's the biggest side and just safest.
Perfect. Now we had a couple people that whole Instagram. See, here we go. Wow. That was a total. We went off in another direction there. Histogram, not Instagram. We're not talking about Instagram today. The histogram conversation got a lot of interest from some people. So we had people asking, is it better to shoot without messing with your camera as in-camera settings? So is it better to keep just a straight, flat JPEG profile rather than messing with it in camera as far as a histogram concerned? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, basically the way that I like to do it is just because I don't take JPEG files. I don't have much opinion on that, besides the fact that just if you're gonna shoot JPEG, make sure that you're exposing very well, so you have information in the area that you're pretending to show. So if your audience is gonna look, let's say this is the picture, well, looks a little bit overexposed, I can see, but I'm just interested that this will look good, well exposed, and the other areas that I'm not interested, they can be over or underexposed, as long as I'm showing what I'm interested to show, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say there's a big conversation, since this is more of an intro-based class, about RAW versus JPEG. And there's different schools of thought. Some people say save the RAWs, even if you don't know what to do with them, if you're just learning, because one day you might know what to do with them, which I think
person.
I think it's great. I mean, I think if you have the storage space, why not? But there are a lot of people who shoot in JPEG and really they just want to post their pictures, take their pictures, post them. They don't do much editing. If you're one of those types who just wants to really have minimal work, you're not doing much post-processing, and it's just images that you're not doing too much with them, you're not doing anything professional, it's just for posting online and sharing with friends and family, then yeah, make some in-camera adjustments, get the image to look how you want in camera, and don't focus too much on how the raw file is, because if you're happy with what you see on the screen, run with it.
Yeah, sure.
And if you're going to do more processing in RAW, and you're taking your photography a little more seriously, or you're trying to learn, then it's probably better to leave a flat image profile in your camera and then work on your post-processing and work on getting the colors and the contrast and the look that you want in post-processing, which leads into another question from Tracy asking about white balance. How important is it to get the white balance correct before shooting? I think this is kind of right along the same lines.
I promised I was gonna talk about white balance today, but I don't want to load you with so much information, so we will leave it for the next session. Don't worry, we still have plenty of time to solve these questions. I'm gonna talk about white balance, so hold into it, and I will solve it. I wanted to tell you also, Derek, and all the people who's listening, that it's really important that this is a lot to take in. It's a lot to learn photography. It's a lot to understand how the shutter speed works, and the f number and the ISO. At least I consider that learning photography, these three basic things, and mastering these things take at least 1 year if you practice every day. So also during that time, you will want to have JPEG files to show to your friends, to show your progress. So I will vote that you will, in that case, use the option to save JPEG and RAW files, so you can have both. And also be prepared. It's funny to say this, but it's be prepared to be disappointed, in the sense that you will, many times you see beautiful pictures, impressive images. Part of it, I will say 50% is capturing, 50% is post-processing. And by post-processing, I don't mean that you use special filters or that you add something in Photoshop. I mean that you also develop an eye post-processing. And that maybe will be the game changer for many, many images. So be prepared that your images, you're making some progress, and with some time, it will look even better and you will develop your eye. Especially when you're capturing raw. First, you will see images that are completely dull and boring, that have no contrast, and you will feel like, oh, what I'm doing wrong, you're doing nothing wrong. It just takes time.
Totally. And I do want to throw this in, because I was going back and forth with Reeds here, who was asking some questions on cameras and lenses, but I think this kind of applies to everybody. So I'm just going to throw it out there for everybody who's watching and listening. It doesn't matter what camera you have. I know that we get sometimes wrapped up in the technology and with new cameras coming out and the spec sheets and what the cameras can do. But a great way that I always look at it is think about any camera from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. At one time in history, every camera was the best camera
The
out.
best camera.
Every new
Sure.
camera. So there's, and if you look at images from 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, there's just amazing, iconic imagery that has been taken since the inception of photography. So any camera you have, there's always magic you can do with it. It's really just about putting the pieces together. Obviously, you can always get better, and there's certain gear that's going to make things easier in certain ways, and there's certain limitations on gear. But and this goes specifically for Reeds, who was asking about DSLR versus mirrorless. If that's what you have, and mirrorless isn't within the budget, or it's, you know, you just got some new gear, learn to perfect what you have.
Yeah.
You know, you if you have, the only car you have is a Toyota Camry, don't go out and buy a Ferrari. Learn to drive on the Camry.
Yep.
And you can always work up to that Ferrari, because it's something that, you know, everybody has the same ideas and concepts. We have different gear, but we're all working with the same light. We're working with the same idea of aperture, ISO, all these techniques that we're talking about, working with the exposure triangle and composition. We're all working on the same plane. It's just the gear that's different. So keep what you have.
Yeah, great images have been done with these cameras. They are great. In 10 years, the cameras that nowadays we are like, oh, this is best camera ever, we will just say that, oh, this is such a piece of crap that works for nothing. So it's just how it is with technology and photography. It's evolving all the time. Don't get discouraged by that. I remember my experience that I was so frustrated always because I wanted to have the best camera available. I felt that having the best camera was going to make me a better photographer, and that was really far from the truth. I spent all my savings on getting a better camera, not even better lenses that maybe might improve who you are as a photographer or your language. I was spending more money on cameras, and that never helped me to reach to the next level. I think it was more investing in education, going out, capturing, networking with photographers, sharing ideas. That helped more than changing equipment. So if you have a DSLR camera, sure, in some time you will want to change it. If you just have your cell phone and you can use, and that's the beautiful thing of what we told, shutter speed, aperture, ISO, everything has been the same from the very beginning of photography. So nothing has changed.
Yes, perfectly wrapped up there. So I want to thank you, Esteban, again for joining us. And for those who have been sticking with us for this entire series, you guys, we'd love to see you guys engaged. We love to see you asking questions, because that means that you're really passionate about getting better. And that's what we're here for, is providing education for the people who want to use it. Right?
That is correct. That's how it is.
Well, thank you, Esteban. Thank you to all of our viewers. And of course, thank you to Sony for sponsoring this series. It's all we got. It's dinner time over here in New York. So we will catch you guys Monday. Another rendition of the B&H virtual event space in the books. Catch you on next time.